This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
You probably remember the news reports of December 26, 2004. A tsunami rushed through the coastal zone of Thailand, destroying everything in its path. A coating of mud almost 2 feet thick covered everything. Now, this was a major event, but still it was only one wave that happened over a few hours in a very localized area of the world. Yet, it produced 2 feet of mud over a mile wide. Now imagine the entire world being flooded for 40 days. Imagine the layers upon layers of silt and mud that would be left behind. That's what happened at the time of Noah. Could it be that fossils ended up in those layers and layers of silt and mud in a matter of a few days, instead of being piled up over millions of years? You're going to get the answer tonight because it's the end of the 6th day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. So, did fossils end up in the earth over millions and millions of years, or was there a worldwide flood that put them there within a matter of days? It's a question you may have never asked before, but we're going to tackle it tonight. So gather everyone you know, because in just a few minutes, you are going to see episode 2 of Flat Earth and the Evolution Conspiracy with Michael Rood and Kent Hovind. We're also going to talk about dinosaurs and their role in the Bible tonight, and you can get this entire teaching series on DVD, Blu-ray, or audio USB that you can play in your car if you want, or wherever else. All you need to do is go to roodawakening.tv/flat. Now, speaking of DVDs and Blu-rays, right now you can get 25% off any DVD or Blu-ray in our collection. It's only good for the month of June, but you must use the promo code 25 to get it when you're going online to order. That's June 25. You'll see a coupon with this information in your astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. And right now we are on the 4th Shabbat of the month of Sivan, and that puts us right at the end of the month. There's one more of the 6 days coming up, but the actual Shabbat comes in our next month, which is Tammuz. Yes, I almost forgot what comes next. And before we get to anything else, please welcome my co-host, the Director of Ministry Development for A Rood Awakening International, Annie Reed.
I am so glad it's Shabbat.
And I had to look to you to see if you knew, and I'm thinking, no, it's Tammuz is coming up next.
No, it's going to be a great Shabbat. We're excited. It's what we look forward to every single week.
Yes.
So turning off the phones, turning off the computers.
Yep, turning on Shabbat Night Live,
That's
have some
right.
fun, laugh with us, laugh at us, or laugh at me, you know.
Well, I laugh
fun.
a lot at me, a lot. So, no, but we're excited to have you here. We're having an excellent show with Kent Hovind and Michael Rood. And tonight's going to be just the frosting on the cake.
Oh, yeah.
Dinosaurs. And I love the fact that they're going into fossils found all over the world as well. Actually, we have a gentleman that we're working with. He'll be here in the near future to do some Shabbat Night Lives with us, but he actually got access into Saudi Arabia to do some filming. And so last week, he actually sent me pictures of seashells that they found in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay.
Near Mount Sinai. So how incredible. I mean, even there.
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia, to my understanding, is doing some kind of major development around the real Mount Sinai. They're planning an entire city, kind of like like how Dubai is a very
Yes.
advanced city. Is that really what they're doing?
That's what they're doing, but I mean, Mount Sinai is there to stay. They're still protecting it. It's still behind the fence. And again, we're going to see that footage later on this year. We're not
Isn't
going to
that
share
interesting?
exactly when. We're waiting for him to return from his travels, but we'll actually have footage of the real Mount Sinai, 4K footage. So.
Oh, wow, that's something that's never been seen before.
Nope, not yet.
Ooh.
So we're excited to have him. We're excited that we teamed up with this ministry. And we're just very blessed that the doors are opening for things like this to be aired.
Wow, and Jim and Penny Caldwell were the first ones to really go in there and get photographs. I mean, Ron Wyatt tried to, and all his stuff got confiscated. So really he was the first, but he never got out with anything. But Jim and Penny did. but they certainly didn't have 4K video footage.
Oh no, it's just exceptional. I mean, when you watch it, it's going to move you to tears. At least it did me. I mean, it's really surprising.
That's interesting. All I've ever seen is still shots of
Yes.
that the rock at Horeb and all those things. Wow. So again, let's get back to this DVD or Blu-ray deal. So this is any DVD or Blu-ray, 25% off. And as we mentioned last week, if you prefer to call in to get your DVDs, you don't even need to use the promo code. Is that right?
Nope, we'll honor the discount, so just feel free to give us a call at any time. Please, we'd love to hear from you. It's 888-766-3610. But, we always try to honor any discount that is going on, whether you know about it or not.
Okay.
Just as a courtesy. And again, we'd love to be able to speak with you, to get to know you over the phone. We are available 24 hours a day.
All right, and that's for a prayer request. And we'll get to prayer requests a little bit later, but yeah, for that too, just want to talk to somebody, we're here for you. Questions, yes.
We have some excellent people that
yes, we do.
are full of knowledge. So.
Yes, Matt, for example, blows my mind every time. Yeah, he's just amazing.
Tremendous. So, no, but everybody here is very excited about what the future holds, not only with this new teaching coming up, with the love gift that we have this month. It's exceptional.
Oh, yeah, speaking of which, there it is right there.
Scattered. So, what happened after Stephen was stoned?
Well, after he was killed, as you can imagine, which would happen in any scenario, everybody scatters, literally scatters. They get out of Dodge because they're scared. They don't want to get killed by Paul, incidentally, who's doing it all, which you probably remember. But some of the things you may not understand about what these guys went through and the miracles they saw and what backgrounds they came from. As Michael mentions in this teaching, I mean, they were dishwashers. They were essentially the guys just helping feed the folks who were still part of the apostles' teachings and things. And they were asked to go do these incredible things and do miracles. So imagine you're in that position. You've never done what you think is of any worth in your life. You've got this little meaningless job in your mind, and Yehovah is asking you to go out and do miracles and just go all over the world and spread his word, and lo and behold, it's happening. And so that's what it's all about.
I love this teaching in particular because ordinary people are doing extraordinary things. And not only that, but it reminds us that we are to do greater works, and that's what I'm holding out for. We're supposed to be doing those same works, those same miracles, healing the sick and raising the dead and everything else in between. So hopefully this is an encouragement to you in your walk, your faith, of the possibilities, the endless possibilities of what Yehovah can do with you if you're willing.
Right. Now that is a gift from Michael to you, and it's a gift to say thank you for supporting this ministry. In May and June and July, June and July, but May's gone already, but June and July, typically what happens is people go on vacation. Maybe they forgot to give to their favorite ministry, this being one of them. And hopefully we see this in ministries all over the world, right? I mean, this happens.
That's right. So, every single nonprofit, not just even ministry, nonprofit will tell you that the summer is usually the slowest. Kids are out of school, people are on vacation, and we get it. We know it's a vacation for all of us. But it is usually our slower months for everything that we do. So we're a little bit more careful about what we do, what we sign up for, as far as even purchasing more airtime, or we kind of holding in the reins a little bit closer, which we're also always very diligent with every dollar that comes into this ministry, because we understand the sacrifice and the love that was poured into it. And first and foremost, we have to be accountable to Yehovah for all that we spend and all that we do. So,
absolutely.
But this summer, we're counting on you, and we're counting on prayers to keep us afloat, on God first and foremost. We know that with Him, all things are possible. And hopefully the summer is the best summer yet.
Yeah, and this is a good way to start it. With this teaching, it's a great gift, and Michael will give that to you as a thank you gift for a donation of $50 or more to the ministry during June only. And if you'd like to give $100 or more, there's another extra gift we'd like to give you an extra thanks. And Annie, what is this we have in front of us
here? It's a really good heavy piece. Now the back is really nice too. I just like the details that this company puts into their work. It's like a felt, so it's just an extra little added feature on the back for it to stand on its own. But it's a stone cast of the fruit of the Spirit with different scriptures listed here from all throughout the New Testament, like let us love one another, for love comes from God, 1 John 4:7. You all have endurance and patience you need, Colossians 1:11. So it's something that goes hand in hand with this teaching in particular about those that are scattered and being crucified and persecuted, and the miracles that are happening, and hopefully something that helps you hold fast your faith and what is happening in your life today. It's for a donation of $100 or more. And again, we appreciate all of your support throughout this month. Not just this month, but the summer, this year, this lifetime. We would not be here if it weren't for you and all that you're doing for this ministry. We're eternally grateful.
That's right. Now, you can get that love gift by going to monthlylovegift.com or 800-788-7887. And something I appreciate about this is, we try and get love gifts sometimes that will sit in your home so that when your friends come over, they say, oh, what's that? And you can start a conversation, tell them maybe about Michael Rood and where you learn things. And I like this one especially because quite often when people start investigating the Hebrew roots of their faith, they get accused of giving up on Yeshua or giving up on Jesus or, denying him and being Judaized and all this kind of thing. And that's really not the truth. And this is a testament to that because all these verses are from the New Testament. It's about the fruit of the Spirit.
Yes.
And it's the same thing you've always believed. It's just you're now enriching your faith, and hopefully this will help explain that to those who walk in your home and have the wrong idea of the deeper roots of your faith that you're stepping into. That's
a good way of putting it. So this gift is for yourself. Honestly, it is something that we actually already have people that work here that have it on their desks. It's a good reminder to yourself of who you should be. And what to expect out of other believers as well.
Yeah, I remember that too, where it's, you often do a self-check where if I really have Jehovah's Spirit within me, are all of these things coming out of me? Goodness, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. And if it's not, then it's like, well, maybe it's time for me to spend a little more time in the Word.
It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. If your character is not one of love and compassion and mercy, then it doesn't matter, all the knowledge, because nobody's going to want to listen to it.
Right, and that means we're letting the world get in our way.
That's
and letting job frustrations get to us, and family, and traffic, and all the rest of it. We just need to be above all that, and this is a good reminder of that. So, now, the flat earth and evolution conspiracy. I love this because Kent Hovind has brought out something that's really interesting. I brought it out last week as well, and I just think we need to say it again, that the choice to choose, or the choice between evolution and creation, whether to believe one or the other, is not about just an opinion. It's whether you're choosing Satan versus God, is the way Kent puts it. And it's the battle of the mind for every believer, to turn them away from believing in the Creator to believing that they themselves are just expendable. Because when you believe in evolution, as he begins to explain in this series, then you are essentially saying that you're expendable because, you're just going to evolve into something else and you're just another piece of the puzzle and you're an animal
or there's another chance.
Or there's not a chance and there's nothing out there, so why believe in anything? And it essentially gets people to give up. And that can't be it.
No, this life cannot be all that we have. There's so much more beyond what we can even comprehend. But I'm excited about this teaching in particular. I think it's easy to follow along. Whether you're new or you've been with us for a long time, there's still things that we continuously learn from all of these teachers. All of these teachers that we've had on this program, we first and foremost believe that they've been here because of prayer. Because there's a lot of prayer that goes into every single guest that walks onto the stage before and during the taping. But also, the knowledge that we learn, it's all so effective. And it's amazing, even for our Passover. For Passover, we kind of give all the teachers like a certain theme of what we want to talk about during that celebration. But we don't narrow down like their themes per se. So like this one in particular was all about redemption. And yet they all came close to a similar conclusion. Even your talk, Scott, was kind of right along what everybody was discussing. And it wasn't necessarily planned. We gave them a theme, but it still coincided. And it's amazing what the Holy Spirit is doing. We know it's Holy Spirit influenced.
It really is. And Annie has a lot to do with bringing the guests in. She has a lot of connections that she brings folks into. And I noticed that, we have to tape these ahead of time to get Michael and these folks together. It's just the way it is. But things happen, like for example in the world, like things that happen in Israel. We'll have a guest coming in talking about Israel and the importance of praying for them. And then at the time that we actually air that episode, all of a sudden something's happening in Israel that we actually had no control over. And it's so timely and relevant because you know Yehovah is choosing it and putting it in those slots, and you know he's at work.
That's
right. You can just see it.
So we pray that these episodes bless you, that they encourage your faith, that if you've been with us for a long time, if you're one of our advanced learners, that they're still edifying your walk in one way or another, or challenging you to do new studies and learn new things. And if you're a newbie, we're so happy that you're here. We love the opportunity to learn along with you and hopefully find some truth along the way, which is what this journey is all about, right?
Indeed. Okay. Well, thank you, Annie. All right. Well, coming up next, episode 2 of 4 in Flat Earth and the Evolution Conspiracy. Tonight, we are talking about the flood and dinosaurs. And if you keep an open mind, you just might change your mind once you hear what Michael Rood and Kent Hovind have to say about it all tonight. You can get the entire series on DVD or Blu-ray or USB using the information on the bottom of your screen. And remember that love gift that we talked about? You can get it tonight. Here's how.
After the stoning of Stephen, Paul continued persecuting the believers in Jerusalem until they were forced to scatter to escape with their lives. In Scattered, Michael Rood brings behind-the-scenes clarity to the incredible true accounts of the apostles in their first solo assignments.
You're not going to go through all of the cities of the Israelites before the Messiah comes. That's what he said. What does that mean? That Israel's been scattered all over the world.
Receive this exclusive teaching for a love gift donation of just $50. Or, with a gift of $100 or more, you'll receive Scattered, plus a gorgeous stone plaque etched with scripture verses about the fruit of the Spirit, character that he desires to show others through you.
Get out there in the world, mix it up. Do what has to be done.
Make your donation now to receive these special gifts. Get the Scattered collection, only in June.
The questions have been pouring in for weeks because our guest on Shabbat Night Live, Dr. Kent Hovind, not only a mathematician, not only someone who has been teaching in the field of science for a number of years, but has made his life mission is understanding the Bible according to provable facts and not the religion of evolution. And so, Kent, it's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
We're going to be doing a lot of exciting stuff, but you know, I have gotten so many questions that have come up just on, here's one right here. This is to me, and so I'll give the short answer, and we will have an entire episode we spent on this, okay? Michael, have you been introduced to the revelation from a biblical and observational evidence that the earth is actually, I guess that means factually, a stationary dome, covered flat plane, just like the scriptures describe? Do some research on this, as it is really opening many people's minds. I have done extensive research on this, and this is what the biblical principle is called, and I will be going into this in great depth, idios epileusis. It is a Greek term, it is in the Bible, and that is exactly what we're dealing here, idios epileusis. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But Kent, we've had other questions that have come up concerning creation. Okay. And the one is the starlight problem. How can we on Earth see that stars are billions of light years away? How does the light ever get to us? This is a problem, is it not?
Well, no. The Bible clearly teaches the whole universe is about 6,000 years old. God made everything in heaven and earth. Jesus said in Matthew 19:4 and Mark 10:6 that the creation of Adam was the beginning. The Bible's clear, nothing died until Adam sinned, 1 Corinthians 15. So the dates in the Bible from Genesis 5 and other places clearly tell us the earth was about 6,000 years old. So what about stars? Well, the Bible also tells us that God made the stars later on day 4, and then 17 times it tells us he stretched them out. So he made the earth, he made the stars, and stretched them out into place. So the distance to the star is it doesn't matter. We're measuring a current distance and looking at the light coming from that star and making a calculation that is flawed on its premise if he stretched them out into place. problem is, you cannot measure the distance to a star beyond just maybe 100 light years. King David said in Psalms 8, "When I consider the heavens, the work of thy hands, the moon, the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him?" I think God knows if we would just go out, like come to Alabama, lay on our sand dunes and look at the stars, it'll blow your mind. You can really see them from there. He knows if people would sit and meditate on the stars, they would say, "Wow, what a mighty God we serve." So Satan has worked hard to use the stars that God made to turn people away from God. And he's doing it with this crazy idea that the stars are billions of light years away, therefore the universe is billions of years old, therefore the Bible is not true.
Oh.
That's what he's done. So the way they measure the distance to a star, I taught trigonometry for years. If you have two observation points looking at a third point, let's say I want to tell the distance across a river or across a lake, or the height of a tree I can't climb. You get two observation points and you calculate the angle between your points and the distance, and it's simple high school trigonometry to calculate a third point. Well, the problem is the stars are so far away, trigonometry will fail you quickly because the Earth is only 8,000 miles in diameter. The furthest you can get away from anybody on Earth is 8,000 miles, straight line. So if I'm looking at a star and somebody else on the opposite side of the world is looking at the star, we can make a triangle and we can tell our angles of declination to that star, and we know our distance apart, but that 8,000 miles compared to a billion is nothing. I mean, on a calculator that wouldn't even register. So they've tried to enlarge the base of our triangle. You look at the star in January, you wait 6 months till we've gone halfway around the sun. Now you've got a much bigger triangle, two observation points. But if you translate all this stuff into inches to make it make sense, we are 8 light minutes from the sun. It takes the sunlight 8 minutes to get here. So the orbit around the sun is 16 light minutes. 1 year has 525,000 minutes in it. 500,000 minutes in 1 year. If I had a triangle with 2 points 16 inches apart, and the third one was 525,000 inches away, which is 8 1/3 miles, would you suppose there was a dot 8 1/3 miles away, and you and I are 16 inches apart? We're both looking at that dot. We know our distance, and we were trying to calculate how far away is that dot. And all we know is our distance and the angle that we're focusing in on. The angle that we're separated is close to 0. It's almost 2 parallel lines to go 8 miles, 8 1/3 miles. That is the problem you have trying to measure 1 light year. 1 light year. If you want to measure 100 light years, you now have to get two people 16 inches apart in Pensacola, Florida, both looking at a dot in Chicago. They don't know how far away the dot is. They're trying to figure that out. And all they have is their distance between them, which they can measure accurately, 16 inches, and their angle. How far out of parallel would your telescopes be if you're both looking at a dot 830 miles away? They'd be basically parallel.
Right.
0.017 degrees is the angle at the apex. You just can't measure. Most people who understand this will tell you, you cannot measure the distance to a star more than maybe 100 light years. I would even give that a big question mark, but I'll give them 100. I'll give them 500 if they quit crying. They're telling me this star is 14.796 billion light years away. How did you measure that? Was it a Lufkin, a Stanley, or a Craftsman tape measure? And who was holding the other end? I want to see that guy. My point I'm making is we simply do not know. So what they do is they look at how bright the star is and they guess how far away it is based on the brightness, which is ridiculous at many levels. How many things can affect the brightness of the star? So we cover all that for an hour on our videotape number 7. If they want to get my video series, the creation series, the question answer is 2 DVDs, a total of 5 hours just on questions like that with thousands of visuals. But the point is we do not know the distance to the star. Secondly, how old was Adam when God made him? He was 0. Did he look 0? No. He looked 65, the perfect age, right? Prime of life. So God made a mature creation. He had to. He could make the stars and the light already showing. I don't know that he did, but he's capable of doing that, just like he made Adam fully grown, fully mature body. He even had he already knew how to speak. He could walk, talk, and get married first day. all that had to be programmed into his head. So the idea of a mature creation is certainly an option. We don't know the distance to the stars. We don't know that light has always traveled the same speed. At Princeton, 20 years ago, they speeded light up to 300 times the speed of light. Well, then the speed of light is not a constant. How can you measure anything with it? They've slowed light down to 0. They've speeded it up. You're using a rubber ruler to try to measure the distance to a star. And the real purpose behind all of it is to discredit the Bible.
And let me ask you, are there any contradictions in the Bible?
I have been reading it for 49 years till my brain hurts. I have had hundreds of people send me supposed contradictions. I think they can all be answered very easily. I don't, if you want to talk about a specific one, but I don't know of any.
I think the Scripture contradicts what people know and what they think and what they want it to say a lot.
Exactly right.
And, apparent contradictions are either in our understanding, they can be in translation, that can happen too. As we know, there's a new translation coming about every other week.
Well, because of money, yeah.
Yeah. But as far as really to understand the Scripture and how it all fits together, that is our job, to make it fit. As holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Let's get back to that. Let's get back to what it really means and live it, because that's where it's all at. Well, we're going to have, let's explore this on a greater depth concerning creation and the book of Genesis in our upcoming episodes. But right now, we're going to let you listen in on this message to our sponsors. And hopefully, it will then include you, because you will decide to be one of our sponsors and to help shoulder the load. Thank you. We'll see you then.
Debate and speculation about how the world began is much more than opinion. It is the cornerstone of doubt and destruction in the decision to choose between Satan and God. Michael Rood and Kent Hovind reveal the subtle deceit within the debate in Flat Earth and the Evolution Conspiracy.
This is really Satan versus God, this whole battle. And it's all, the battle is for the minds of men, to turn them away from believing in the Creator to believing that they came from a rock and that they're expendable.
In Flat Earth and the Evolution Conspiracy, Michael Rood and Kent Hovind explain the details of a conspiracy against the Almighty himself, leading even the elect to fall away.
I said, how do you tell right from wrong? This one senior anthropology major evolutionist stood up. He said, that's easy. He said, I decide what's right or wrong. He said, I'm the God of my own universe.
Flat Earth and the Evolution Conspiracy. Order now by phone or visit aroodawakening.tv/flat.
The composite of the gospel records tell us that before the Passover lamb was sacrificed the following morning, that Yeshua had his Last Supper with his disciples, in which he took bread, arton, leavened bread, and he took wine, and he said, this represents my body, which will be broken for you. This cup represents my shed blood, which will pay for the iniquity. It is this very thing that the Melchizedek shared with Abraham. As Yeshua said, Abraham saw my day and rejoiced. And when the Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine, he shared with them about the coming of the Messiah, about his broken body, about his shed blood. And Abraham gave a tenth of everything that he owned and laid it at the feet of the Melchizedek. He saw Yeshua's day and he rejoiced. And so now, every time we do this, every Sabbath, every meal in which there's bread and wine, in which we take this and we bless the Most High. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Yeshua said, this is my body, which is broken for you. As often as you do it in remembrance of me. And then Yeshua took the cup, and he said, blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine, the creator of the fruit of the vine. And every time we do this, we do remember his death and what he did for us until he comes. One day, at the marriage supper of the Lamb, Yeshua will lift his cup and say, I have not had a drop of this, as I promised at the Last Supper. I've been waiting for you. Now, l'chaim, to life everlasting. In the first episode of the series, we learned that there is no evidence for the religion of evolution. No scientific evidence. In fact, the theories of evolution even violate known laws of science. But this week, we're going to deal with creation. We're going to go right back to in the beginning, deal with creation, and all the way to the flood with Kent Hovind. Kent, good to have you back with us.
Well, thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Well, let's start in the beginning. Let's start with the evidence for creation and what we see in the book of Genesis.
Okay. Well, the Bible just starts off saying, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Does not explain where God came from. Doesn't explain where he got the power or authority to do this. It's just assumed this is God.
And so that knowledge is way above our pay grade.
Way above our pay grade, outside of all of that stuff. It'd be kind of like two computers arguing with each other. Where did man come from? I don't know, but he made you guys, okay? So the Bible says in 2 Peter chapter 3 that the scoffers in the last days would be willingly ignorant. In the Greek, that means dumb on purpose, I think. I don't speak any Greek, but that's close enough. Okay. The scoffers are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. They don't understand.
They seem to work hand in hand, really.
It all goes together. Yeah. And Satan has spent his whole career trying to deceive people into thinking there's not going to be a judgment day. You're fine. Go ahead and sin. That's the bottom line of all of this.
Do what thou wilt.
Yeah. So Christians also are pretty ignorant of the creation. What was that original world like? What we see today is not what Adam and Eve saw. The creation was very different. And then it was destroyed by a flood. So what we see is the after effects of Noah's flood. I was in a debate with an atheist one time. He said, if there was a worldwide flood, where'd all that water go? I said, well, it's still here. The oceans are huge. Do you know all the continents in the world would fit in the Pacific Ocean?
Oh.
Just that one ocean would hold them all. There's enough water on the earth right now to completely cover the earth about 1.5 miles deep. 8,000 feet. If you smoothed everything out, it'd be 8,000 foot of water. That's plenty to drown in.
Oh, yeah.
So, but they don't want to admit God created the world because that would mean he owns it and he has authority to make rules. They don't want to admit there was a flood because that's proof he's got authority to judge his creation. They don't want to admit that. And they sure don't want to admit there's a coming judgment. So my ministry, we focus on those three things. What's the evidence for the creation? What was it like? Why did they live to be 900 years old before the flood? You read Genesis 5, and Adam lived to be 930, Methuselah 969. What was different? And I think it's essential that Christians understand what we see is not what Adam and Eve saw. It's the same size planet, but it's been radically rearranged by that big flood in the days of Noah. So those are the things I emphasize is the scientific evidence for the creation. We find fossils in the ground. Now, how do we interpret that? We find fossil clams on top of Mount Everest. Okay, what's the interpretation? Okay, there was a flood. Now, I don't think the water was over Mount Everest. I don't think Mount Everest existed until near the end of the flood. The Bible says in Psalm 104, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, and the water rushed off.
That explains a lot.
Well, yeah. If we filled this studio 2 feet deep in water, the secretary would be upset. But other than that, if we lift up one end of the building, the water's going to rush down to the other side. All the water's still in the building. It's just now located in one big puddle, and part of it's above sea level. If the crust of the earth is broken up, like it certainly is, we have fault lines all over the place, if sections of the plate of the earth would tilt a mile, one place lifts up, the other place drops down, the water rushes off, you now have an ocean and a continent. It's very interesting, if you look at a map of the world, nearly all the mountain ranges follow the coastlines. You got the Appalachian Mountains that follow the North Atlantic. You got the Rocky Mountains that follow the Pacific. The Alps in Switzerland follow the Mediterranean Sea. Why do all the mountain ranges follow the coastlines? Well, because they formed at the same time because of the same thing. During the end of Noah's flood. Probably India was sliding up and hit Asia and bumped up Mount Everest and all the Himalaya mountains during the last part of the flood, and you end up with clams on top of Mount Everest. See, the Christians can explain that without a problem with the understanding of the flood. But people who don't believe in a worldwide flood, especially Christians, I think are very hindered and tying their own hands in the fight. that's essential to understand where the fossils come from, period. And why is the earth only 3% habitable today when Isaiah 45, God said he formed it to be inhabited? Why do they find trees at the South Pole, leaves near the South Pole? Well, there's nothing growing down there, but yet there's leaves there. So why do we find coal in the ground, huge seams of coal? Where'd all that come from? Well, again, the flood. So I don't know which direction you want to go on all that, but Satan he's desperately trying to lie to people so they don't believe in the creation and they don't believe in the worldwide flood. Those are two of his big battlefields.
Well, as far as creation is concerned, and the evidence as far as divine design, intelligent design, that's evident. That's what you see in any scientific investigation. That's where it all points to.
There has to be a designer. You find an arrowhead in a pile of rocks. You immediately conclude, correctly, somebody made this. I don't know who, I don't know when, I don't know where, I don't know why, but somebody made this. This is a man-made object. When you look at a cell under the microscope, you should say, wow, somebody designed this. You can look through the microscope or the telescope. Either way, you should come back to the conclusion, there's a designer. And Satan has worked so hard to get people to not come to the only logical conclusion that there is.
Right. And so that really encapsulates Genesis 1 and 2.
Yep.
And then we move on right on down the storyline and we get to the flood. And what's the evidence? What do we see in the physical universe, in the topography, even in the United States? We got some things that are so obvious that they are from the flood, there's just no other way to explain them.
It boggles my mind. I ask the atheist sometimes, I get a little sarcastic, and I haven't even asked God to take it away, but I say, did you have help to be that stupid? I mean, you couldn't do that on your own. You must have gone to college for years and had somebody help you get that stupid.
Right. I see evident a lot. People will ask questions. I know they're not stupid enough to figure this thing out. You know, you've got to have learned this. Somebody else has got to have fed you that information, because nobody would on their own be that stupid.
Right. Well, all over the world, farmers build dams to hold water for their cows and build a little pond. Our Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama has 10 lakes on the property, man-made lakes. You should come down. The fishing's incredible. One of our guys caught a bass that far from the boat.
I'll be down.
Well, he's only that big, but he was that far from the boat. Okay. So we have fishing and boating and all kinds of fun stuff to do there. But if we have the dam, the biggest lake on our property is 11 acres, and before we got the property, the dam had washed out. They had a storm, too much rain, went over the top. Once the water goes over the top of the dam, it starts cutting a notch, and then it's no longer just erosion. Within a few minutes, it's picking up sand and rocks, and it becomes like liquid sandpaper. So now it's eroding and abrading. If it gets moving fast enough, there are several other factors that come in with rapidly moving water called cavitation. Ask anybody who drives a boat. The propeller on the boat will get cavitation pits. You see, what is this from? Rapidly moving water creates a suction that'll suck pieces of metal right off of your propeller. Cavitation pits. Rapidly moving water through a breach in a dam will start sucking the rocks out of the side. It'll dissolve, it'll eat through concrete. So rapidly moving water through a breach in a dam can cause erosion. That's incredible. We built a little bitty dam 3 feet high to stop the lake while we fixed the big one a couple years ago. A year ago, Christmas time, I said, hey guys, let's video this. I'm going to cut a notch in the dam and we're going to let it erode. We're ready now, the big one's done, okay? So I got a shovel, made a little notch about a foot deep, let the water start flowing. Within about 7 minutes, it was roaring through there and washed out the whole thing. We got it all on video. If they go to my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official, go back to December 23rd of 2016, I think. You can go back and search the dam break at Dinosaur Adventureland. It's amazing. Once it gets started, it's gone. Well, Grand Canyon is a giant example of that. It's a washed out spillway. After Noah's flood, the rain stopped, the water stopped coming up from inside, because most of the water came from in the earth for the flood. We need to get into that sometime. So the world was flooded. Then the water starts to settle down. The crust of the earth gets reshuffled into its current position. The plates of the earth begin to tilt and shift, and the earth's busted up into hundreds of plates with fault lines everywhere. So now the earth is settled down. There was a gigantic lake backed up behind where today Grand Canyon is. Grand Lake and Hopi Lake, they're called. The beach lines are still there. The lake is long gone. They got too full. They went over the top of the Kaibab Plateau and started carving out a canyon. And any farmer will tell you if the dam starts to break, it erodes backwards. The water flows over the dam and starts eating at the other side and eats its way back. Once it eats its way back into the lake, it's all gone. Okay, it's over with. And then if you go see the damage afterwards, you've got this, the dam is all still there except one slot cut in it, and the lake is gone. And at the bottom, there'll be a little creek flowing through the little crack in the dam. That little creek did not cause that big canyon.
Oh, that's what we learn in school,
Sure.
that little creek, the Colorado River, carved down through these rocks through millions and millions of years. And so the flood really gives us the answer to what happened there.
Well, I was in a debate with an atheist one time. He said, Hovind, you're so stupid. Don't you know it took millions of years to make Grand Canyon? I said, well, whether I'm stupid or not is a totally different argument, but let's talk about Grand Canyon. The top of Grand Canyon, the Kaibab Plateau, is about 7,000 or 8,000 feet above sea level elevation. The river starts cutting Grand Canyon at Page, Arizona, which is less than 3,000 feet above sea level. So from Page, Arizona to the top of Grand Canyon is about 5,000 feet, almost a mile. That's where the river starts cutting the canyon. It comes out at the other side at Lost Wages, Nevada, where it's 1,800 feet above sea level. So the river flows 277 miles through over really a big bump, a mountain, a ridge. The ridge is 8,000 feet high. It starts cutting the canyon at less than 3,000 feet. I said, guys, rivers don't flow uphill in Arizona or Alabama. I don't think they do in North Carolina either. But that river could not make that canyon. There had to be a big lake backed up. It went over the top of the ridge, cut the canyon out, starting in Lost Wages, and worked its way back. And so now there's a little river running through the bottom called the Colorado River. That river didn't make that canyon. Grand Canyon is a breached spillway, probably formed in a couple weeks, would my guess.
Okay, and this is all something that we see in the physical world happening as you did and demonstrated when you cut the spillway right at the pond.
Well, one atheist said, oh, that was sand you guys had your dam out of. I said, look at Grand Canyon. It's made of all the different sandstones, Tapete sandstone, all the different sandstones.
Right.
I would be a wild guess on my part, but I would say Grand Canyon formed 50 years after Noah's flood was over. Everything is still draining, and it's still raining, and the lake filled up, covered half of Colorado, half of Utah, half of Nevada, and it got too full. And what's it going to do? It's going to find the lowest point. Look at a map of California sometime. They got a great big valley in the middle, the Central Valley. There's a mountain range along the Nevada side, and there's a mountain range along the coastal side called the Coastal Range. There's a notch in the middle where San Francisco is. What if you plugged up that gap? Take a lot of dirt, but if you could plug up the gap between the northern and southern coastal range, a great big lake would fill in. All of Central California would be a lake. Once it got too deep, it's going to find the lowest point, like water always does, and carve out a notch, and probably San Francisco Bay formed in a couple of days as that lake drained, leaving behind really nice fertile soil, the Central Valley of California.
Beautiful. I need to talk to you about something. You know that we sink every dollar of your donation into getting the gospel of the kingdom out to the world. We don't buy Lear jets. We don't build mega churches, although we do have a mega church online every single week. We broadcast the gospel of the kingdom that Yeshua taught, and that does not come without great expense. You may get to watch it for free, but behind the scenes there are many expenses. Buying airtime so that you can see this program, cameras, lighting, computers, salaries, everything else it takes for you to see what you're seeing now. If you want to continue receiving it, we need your help. Specifically, the broadcast cameras that we use have a 2 to 3 year lifespan. That's just the nature of broadcast technology. Our current cameras are now 6 years old, and every day we are thankful that they still work to the degree that they do. If you want us to continue providing the truth to networks around the world and to you, we need to act now to replace our failing equipment. And since you are this ministry's only sponsor, I'm coming to you to ask for your help. If this ministry has changed your life like it has the lives of people around the world, I need your help, and I need it now. How much you give is between you and the Heavenly Father. The only thing I ask is that you are serious about it. I shouldn't have to take out a loan from a bank, nor will I. Be honest with yourself and be honest with the Almighty about giving your very best. You give your best at your workplace. You give your best to your family. Giving your best to the Almighty for what He is doing in your life through this ministry is your reasonable service. Thank you. We're going to take a break for 2 minutes so that you can donate to this ministry. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue following the trail of evidence, the Colorado River, and see where it leads us and what the evidence is for the worldwide flood. Kent Hovind.
Well, yes, sir. I taught earth science 15 years. I've always been fascinated by this planet we live on. I think this is our home. We better learn about it. And I love studying it. There's some amazing things. But Satan is using all the geology that we see, the geography that we see, to turn people away from God. And it just, you go to Grand Canyon and you see it's got thousands of layers in the side of it. Okay. The textbook will say each of these layers is a different age. They call it the geologic column. Mm-hmm. Most kids are never taught this geologic column doesn't exist anywhere except the textbook.
Right.
It's a made-up construct in 1830 by a lawyer who hated the Bible, Charles Lyell. His book that he wrote about that stupid geologic column influenced Charles Darwin to turn away from God. And today, kids go to school and they'll see pictures of all the rock strata around the world, and there are some beautiful formations, and say, see, boys and girls, this is millions of years. No, this is all from Noah's flood. If the earth were completely covered by water, the moon would be pulling the water up in the tide. Now, the tidal bulge today, it varies all over the world depending on a lot of factors, but about 5 feet tidal change is kind of average. As the world is turning, the moon is also moving. So you would get a high tide, low tide every 6 hours. It would change, but now because the moon moved, it's 6 hours and 25 minutes. Who cares? Anyway, so roughly 6 hours and 25 minutes, you get high tide, and then 6 hours and 25 minutes later, you get a low tide, is the world average. Well, if there were no continents to stop the tides, the tide would become harmonic. music folks know about harmonics, how one string can influence the other strings in the piano or on the instrument. So the scientists tell us that if the earth were completely covered by water, the tides would be about 200 feet every 6 hours and 25 minutes. Well, if you get a 200-foot bulge of water going up and down, where's that water coming from? It's coming in from the sides. So you not only have vertical movement, you have horizontal movement of billions of gallons of water. During Noah's flood, this water contains all kinds of dead stuff that drowned in the flood. Dead trees, dead plants, dead animals, dead everything. And it's going to sort them into thousands of layers. And the heavier stuff's going to go to the bottom. You can get a jar, hydrologic sorting. Get a jar, put some sand, gravel, clay, mud, water, shake it up really good and set it down. It'll settle into layers in a few seconds. Okay? Noah's flood sorted all these layers, and Satan said, I've got to figure out how to use the obvious evidence for a flood to turn people away from God. And that's what's happened in the last 6,000 or 4,400 years since that flood. The devil has worked really hard to get people to look at the world and see evolution rather than see creation and flood. In 2 Peter warned us.
So that's stupid on purpose.
Stupid on purpose. That's what Peter said. The scoffers in the last days would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. See, I can look at the same evidence that the atheist looks at. We both see the same evidence. There's a canyon in Arizona called the Grand Canyon. It's 277 miles long. We both see the same thing. We both believe it's there. We have very different interpretations of how it got there. And
one is that the Colorado River went uphill for a mile, or a mile high, and then started carving it down.
It flowed uphill for a mile.
Yeah, flowed uphill for a mile.
That's brilliant.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that happen.
just one place on the planet that it happens.
Well, the Mississippi River, it flows from Minnesota all the way down to New Orleans. It only drops about 1,000 feet. In that, it drops 7 inches per mile. Because the Mississippi flows very gently compared to some rivers, Mississippi River, 7 inches per mile, it loops back and forth. If you have a sloped concrete driveway, turn the hose on, let the water run down your drive. It'll start looping. Well, why is that? It's just a phenomena of moving water physics. But Mississippi River loops back and forth because it's what's called a low gradient stream. If you get a river moving on high gradient, very rapid drop, it'll be straighter. Well, Grand Canyon is both. It loops back and forth and is real steep sides. So they look at it and say, wow, how did the river do this? Well, the river didn't do that. See, when the lake drained, Grand Lake and Hopi Lake, after the flood, I'm guessing 50 years, by 50 years after the flood, the crust at the top would dry out. You'd get hard rock, maybe for a couple 100 feet thick. Underneath is still mud trapped. It would take hundreds of years, after Noah's flood, hundreds of years for the planet to dry out. As it's drying out in some areas, it's caught in limestone, and so the dead stuff that's in there causes carbonic acid to form in the water. So the water is slightly acidic, which eats through limestone and forms caves. Carlsbad Caverns, all that stuff probably formed after the flood. As the water's leaching out. Depending on a lot of factors. How acidic is it? How tightly packed is the mud? And how fast can it exit? There's all kinds of things would change the formation rate of the cave. And then the things start to drip off the ceiling and you get stalactites on the bottom, stalagmites. If you look at the size of those things, stalactites and stalagmites, and measure how fast do they grow and how big are they, and do the math, you're going to say, wow, this is only a few thousand years old. Well, yeah, Noah's flood was 4,400 years ago.
Right, that's measurable. Stalactites and stalagmites is it's almost like a time clock.
Well, we don't know all the things that influenced it during that time. Was there more airflow? Was there more acidic water? Blah, blah, blah. But a lot of factors influence that. But generally, I think you could come to the conclusion, it's not billions of years old. That's for sure.
Right.
So all over, just Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, I think those states have about 5,000 caves each. Limestone caves. Probably formed after the flood. Most are not, they know where they are, but they don't go in and explore them. They're not open commercially for visitors. A few hundred of them are. Well, I think the Bible says the scoffers are willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment. Kids ought to be taught in earth science class about caves and say, wow, 90% of this cave probably formed in the first 6 weeks while the limestone was soft and there was more water coming through. Now it has slowed way down to its current rate of formation. But Satan is using the caves, which I love studying caves, spelunking and all that, but he's using them to turn kids away from the very God they should look at that evidence and think about the judgment of God. Satan doesn't want people thinking about God's judgment on their sin, but yet when you dig up a fossil, this thing died in a flood. These are found on top of Mount Everest, not this particular one, but that ought to remind us of God's judgment. People have reminders all the time. There's little signs out, stop, to remind you to stop when you come to this place, or speed limit 70, to remind you. We need constant reminders of what the law is. We need reminders of what God's law is. If the soul that sinneth, it shall die. And when you dig up fossils, you look at a dead bone and you say, man, this thing died, this trilobite died. I'm going to die one day. But rather than be a constant reminder of our responsibility to the Creator, Satan uses the fossils as evidence for his dumb theory of evolution. So I'm sick of it. I'm going to put a stop to it or die trying.
Now, as far as we were talking just before our break, I was mentioning about the petrified forest, the wood.
Right.
We have the evidence of the petrification. We've got dinosaur bones. Tell us about that in relationship to the flood.
Well, when any object, a living object, like a tree, a piece of wood, or a bone from an animal, which has loads of holes in it called cells, okay? If it gets buried in the mud, as it starts to decay and rot, if the mud has water with minerals in it, it'll soak into those holes and harden. And it replaces what was there. So petrified wood is actually not wood anymore. It's completely been replaced. It's called a replacement fossil. It's been replaced by the minerals, the quartz or the opalite or whatever's in the water. Replaces it and makes some really beautiful fossils, petrified wood, example, or petrified bones. So petrification can take place very rapidly under pressure with highly mineralized water. A guy called me from Montana. He said, Kent, would you like a petrified pickle for your museum? I said, of course. Who in their right mind would not want a petrified pickle? I said, what do you got? He said, well, there's an old house out in the woods by my house. He said, the roof is gone, the walls have fallen out, an old house. He said, there's a part of the pantry was still there. And inside the pantry was a jar. The lid had rusted off, and inside was a pickle. It was dried out now, and it turned to stone. Would you like it? I said, yeah, I've got it in my museum. Come to see Dinosaur Adventureland. Now, they did studies on the jar, because it still had a bunch, most jars have a bunch of numbers on the bottom. You can tell what factory made it and what year it was made and all that stuff. They said this jar was made in the 1960s. Okay, so here we have a pickle turned to stone inside a jar made in the 1960s. I think it would be logical to conclude, Sherlock, that the pickle is less than millions of years old, probably less than 50 years old, okay, when it was found. And so it's just logic that says, wow, things can fossilize rapidly. I have a fossilized teddy bear in my museum. Turned to stone.
A teddy bear?
A teddy bear, proving they had teddy bears millions of years ago.
Millions and millions of years.
You've got a petrified rose turned to stone. Come see it. You've got a Dinosaur Adventureland.
I'm going to be there.
Because Google Lenox, Alabama, and your computer will say, you have got to be kidding. We don't know where that is. Nobody does. Okay? But the guy called us 2 years ago and said, Brother Hovind, your videos changed my life. Can I help you? I said, well, yeah, what do you want? He said, what are you trying to do? I said, I'm trying to get land in Alabama to build a Christian camp, Dinosaur Adventureland. He said, have you found something? I said, yeah, it's an old gravel pit, 140 acres, 10 lakes on it. He said, how much do they want? I told him. He said, all right, I'll buy it for you. Bought it and gave it to us. We've been for 2 years building Dinosaur Adventureland. But in our little museum there, we have stuff like the petrified pickle, hundreds and hundreds of petrified clams and trilobites. And we want to use the fossil evidence that's in the ground as a way to remind people, look, God's word is true. The earth was completely destroyed by a flood. But the scoffers don't want to admit there was a flood, because that indicates, it indicates God judges sin, and God has authority to judge his creation. See, they don't want to give God the authority to tell them anything. They want to be their own God, like Lucifer. I will ascend into heaven. I will be like the Most High. Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28. So So the purpose of our little ministry is to do just that, to get people to refocus and say, oh, wow, there's a creator, and there was a flood, and there's coming a judgment again. So Grand Canyon, you mentioned the fossilized wood. At one end of Grand Canyon, there is a huge petrified forest. On the, I think it's in the New Mexico side. I'd have to look and see.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Okay. Huge petrified logs. Well, if you can get a map of that area, plug up Grand Canyon visually, fill it in with dirt, and then draw a line. Where would the lake be? Draw a line of what, at that elevation, how big would the lake be? And you'll find that petrified wood is in the lake. Even though it's, a couple hundred miles from Grand Canyon, petrified forest, it would fit in the lake that would form if the canyon were dammed off, the whole canyon. I believe during Noah's flood, there was billions of trees got knocked down and floating all over the place. Some of them got buried real deep, and under the mud, they would, under pressure, turn to coal. Coal can be made in a few minutes in the laboratory, under heat and pressure. Some of the lakes, some of the logs would be floating in an area, it's kind of a shallow area that's slowly drying out. As it slowly dries out, if there's a lot of minerals in the water, they would be petrified in a matter of a year. So these giant petrified logs and petrified forests that they find are indication of, again, of Noah's flood. And it can all be explained from the creation and the flood model. Oftentimes, petrified trees are found standing up. I show pictures in my seminar of hundreds of them. Petrified trees standing up, running through all the layers of rock. Now, the atheists are going to tell the kids, these layers are different ages. How long does a dead tree stand up before it falls over in your neighborhood? 4, 5, 6 years? How can a petrified tree be standing up, connecting a whole bunch of layers that are supposed to...
Millions and millions of years.
Sometimes in Germany, there's a cliffside where they have petrified trees upside down, standing up. The root end is up, and the branch end is down, running through many layers of rock. I say, guys, you really got to stop and think about this. Did the tree get confused and grow upside down through solid rock for millions of years trying to find sunlight? I'm going to find that really hard to believe.
Well, don't we have a recent example, Mount St. Helens, what happened there?
Oh, yeah.
That gives a similar picture?
Well, my sister lives up near Mount St. Helens, and when Mount St. Helens blew, it blew trees down for hundreds of square miles of trees got blown down. Many of them got blown into the lake, Spirit Lake, which is not too far from Mount St. Helens. There's a floating log mat. It's still there today, 25 years later. 30 years later. There are still hundreds of trees floating in Spirit Lake. They got blown in there from the volcano. But thousands and thousands of those trees within the first few years got waterlogged and they sank to the bottom. Thousands of them sank root end down. The root end is heavier. So they sink and they stick in the mud at the bottom. Every year you get seasonal changes and snow melt and mud washes in. So there's layers and layers of mud being built up around those standing tree trunks. If that area, if they ever drain Spirit Lake, cut a notch and drain the lake and let it dry out, somebody's going to go in there and find those trees are petrified, standing up, running through all kinds of layers. And they're going to tell their kids, oh, boys and girls, this formed millions of years ago in the Carboniferous era, or something like that. Just plain lie to them. It happened in 1980, folks, okay? It wasn't millions of years ago. But we see on a small scale what probably happened worldwide.
Well, Kent, I have a question on this. You have a lot of evidence concerning the dinosaurs and the petrified bones and all, but there's something that came along much later in this line. Actually, I have some cufflinks that are made from the tusk of mastodon.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so this is peculiar. This isn't millions and millions. There's no way that these can be described, what happened with these mastodons, with any kind of scientific thing that evolution or any of these things. So what do you know about mastodons?
We have a replica of a mastodon skull with big tusks in our museum. You can come see that. Mastodon, mammoth, elephant, African elephant, Asian elephant are the 4 animals that would look very, very similar, but be different varieties of the same kind. They're considered different species. Some mammoths have been found that have 4 tusks. A 4-tusk mammoth. Not very often, but they existed. Okay, whether it's an anomaly, a mutation, or something, I don't know, but they do find them. Joe Taylor in Crosbyton, Texas, has dug one up. I don't know where he found it, Colorado, I think, excavated it. But mastodons are sometimes found frozen, standing up, with food still in their mouth, food still in their stomach, undigested.
And where was this found? What part of the world?
Siberia, up in northern Russia, Siberia, northern Alaska. I think they found 57 frozen mammoths, I think is the right number. One guy met me. He said, yeah, my dad was part of an organization that went up and digging out mammoths, and they had a dinner one time where they all ate mammoth steak.
I heard that was done.
Well, I met the son of the guy who did it.
Okay, all right.
And I've got all the documentation in my slide presentation. But to get a mammoth frozen standing up, you just figure it's just like an elephant, only now it's got a lot of hair on it. So it'd be even a little harder to freeze because he's got insulation factor of the hair. Elephants don't have a lot of hair. I called Birdseye Frozen Food people. I said, hey, I got a question. If I stuck an elephant in the freezer, what would happen? There was silence on the other end of the line while they're chuckling in the background. What do we got on the phone here? The guy said, well, you'd have a crowded freezer. I said, well, yeah, I know. I said, how long would it take to freeze an elephant? They said, probably 5 days. You know, these are experts on rapidly freezing product, Birdseye Frozen Food people, you know. They said it'd take about 5 days to freeze. Because what would happen, any woman that's ever thawed out or frozen a large turkey or something will tell you, yeah, it takes 24 hours to thaw the thing out. Because if you thaw the outside and the middle is still frozen. Well, the reverse is true if you try to freeze a turkey. It gets a frozen surface on the outside, and then the middle is still retaining the heat. It takes a long time to freeze it to the center. And to go 12 inches takes about 24 hours to freeze that far, depending on a lot of factors. But they said to freeze your elephant would take about 5 days. I said, now hold it. In the stomach of the elephant, there are still buttercups, flowers. There is undigested food. After the elephant dies, the stomach acid does not know he's dead. It's going to keep doing its job. It should have dissolved in, the food. I said, how could I possibly freeze an elephant in 5 hours? They said, you'd have to cut him up into small pieces. I said, nope, I got to freeze him complete. They said, you're going to have to use liquid nitrogen, something 300 or 400 below zero. Well, it never gets 300 below zero on Earth. The coldest ever recorded at near the South Pole, National Geographic, said the coldest temperature was minus 127. That's pretty chilly. But that's still not cold enough to freeze the mammoths the way we find them. Okay, so how do you answer this? Well, the Earth had to have something colder than that. Now, there are 2 different theories on that. One is that an ice meteor came and hit the Earth, and because super cold ice is magnetic, it would be drawn to the North and South Pole, following the magnetic lines of flux. That's what I've taught for years, and it's still a good theory. Another theory is that the Earth was surrounded by a canopy of ice, maybe 10 miles up, a couple inches thick. The Jews have always taught that there was a crystalline canopy around the world. Now, some creationist groups don't believe this. They're wrong. I'm right. Okay. There was a crystalline canopy above the Earth. If it was shattered at the time of the flood, it would be sucked in and dumped on the poles because it would follow the magnetic field and be dumped on the north. You would get a rapid snow dump on the North Pole, which would push out then all the way down to Kansas City, Missouri. And we have obvious glacial effects. I mean, grooves in the rock where ice slid across the rock, forming glacial grooves. They're all over North America.
Right.
The ice age seems to be centered around the magnetic North Pole, not the real North Pole. The Earth has 2 North Poles. So Hovind theory, and I covered that in my video series about, I think the ice age came as a result of the flood. The fountains of the deep broke open, shot rocks up, shattered the canopy. It got drawn in and stuck on the North and South Pole. The mammoths would be up there eating their tropical flowers and their buttercups, having a wonderful time, and all of a sudden it began to snow. Super cold ice, like 300 below zero ice crystals.
That's space.
From outer space is minus 459.
Right, yeah.
And so it would be dumped on the mammoths, and they would be trapped standing up. They couldn't. If you've ever been in snow so deep you couldn't even fall over?
Yeah,
okay.
I have.
Sure. Well, that's what happened to the mammoths, I think. I think the only explanation for what we find, that you look at the physical evidence and then try to come to a reasonable theory. And the Bible gives the only logical theory. There was something above the atmosphere that protected them before the flood came that made them live to be 900 years old. that made the reptiles live to be 900, which would turn them to be ginormous since reptiles never stop growing. That's where the dinosaurs fit in. We'll get into that another time. But this canopy of ice is probably the solution for what happened to freeze the mammoths standing up. Frozen rhinoceros, frozen camels. There are no camels near the North Pole that I know. Camels, 15 feet tall. That's a big camel. Well, you've seen camels over there in the Middle East. What are they, 7 or 8 feet tall?
Yeah, they're not 15 feet tall.
Not 15 feet. So there are some really strange things found all around the north, Siberia, northern Russia, North Alaska. I was preaching in Alaska, and I met a guy. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I drill oil on the north slope of Alaska. I said, do you ever find anything unusual? He said, man, yeah. He said, we drilled through 1,000 feet of permafrost, permanently frozen ground. They're looking for oil. He said, we drilled down 1,000 feet and we started to hit wood. And we always take whatever we drill out of the hole and lay it on the ground so we can keep track of what formation we're going through. We lay a big column out on the ground. So we got this big long column out and we start to hit wood. He said, we drilled right through the top of a tree that was standing up. He said the tree was 300 feet tall. There are very few trees in the world 300 feet tall. There are no trees in North Alaska 300 feet tall. Matter of fact, there's only one tree in North Alaska and I got to see it in a Chinese restaurant. They got lights on it all winter to try to keep it alive. It's about 4 feet high and about this big around in the Chinese restaurant in Barrow, Alaska. Keep the tree alive, you know. It's hilarious. But the evidence is there's a tree 300 feet tall under 1,000 feet of permanently frozen ground. How do we interpret that? Well, a Christian who believes the Bible would say, yeah, there was a worldwide flood. God formed the earth to be inhabited. That's why he made it for us to live on. Today it's only 3% habitable. 70% of it's underwater. A lot of the rest of it's deserts, ice caps, mountain ranges, tundra. You can't live there. So I think the earth was mostly habitable before the flood. The flood destroyed all that. Peter said the scoffers are going to be willingly ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment, 2 Peter chapter 3. So today the earth is tilted over, all the globes are put on a stand like this, tilted over 23.5 degrees. What if it wasn't tilted? What if the earth were spinning at perfect right angle to the sun? Well, then everybody gets 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. The North Pole, the South Pole, everybody. That's called equinox. We have that in the spring equinox and the May 21st and September 21st. So we're going to get equal nights. And it's beautiful. Springtime everybody loves springtime. It would be perpetual springtime if the earth were not tilted over 23.5 degrees in its spin. So probably there were tropical flowers growing at the North Pole. The earth was completely habitable. A canopy above would even the temperature where it'd be nice and warm everywhere, like being in a greenhouse, equalizes the temperature all over the place. And after the flood, this ice being dumped on the poles, on the magnetic poles, slightly off-center. If you took a spinning object and threw a glob of mud on it, off-center, it would cause it to wobble. I think the earth wobbled for a few hundred years after the flood and finally settled in at our new angle of 23.5 degrees. And that probably happened in the last couple thousand years. And now we're spinning over and we have seasons. The first mention of cold weather is Genesis 8, after the flood. Cold weather, the first mention.
Interesting.
Heat and cold shall not cease. Genesis 8:22, I think. Anyway, so back to the mammoths. We have some replicas, you have some mammoth tusks there. They dig up these animals and say, wow, what happened here? They find thousands and thousands of mammoth tusks all over northern Siberia. There's a whole trade where they haul them off and sell them because of the ivory. We've got a small mammoth tusk in our museum, a real one, and some giant replicas of. So to answer your question, a long answer to a short question, the mammoths they're probably extinct, and they probably went extinct after Noah's flood. Noah would have had them on the ark. People hunted them for meat. There'd be a lot of hamburger in a mammoth, okay? You could feed the village for a while for their hair or whatever reasons. And so as far as anybody can tell, they're extinct. Though it would be difficult to prove the extinction of anything. You'd have to be all places at all times. There are rumors that there are some mammoth-like elephants still in Nepal and India in that region, but I don't know.
Well, you've done some collecting through the years of sightings and different what were considered to be extinct mammals.
Especially dinosaurs, extinct reptiles. They are. I don't believe they're extinct, brother. There's a lot. We'll talk about that another time, unless you want to go now. But dinosaurs is my favorite topic. DrDino.com. Our phone number 855-BIG-DINO.
Okay.
Extinction.
Well, then that's something that we're going to want to go back on.
Okay.
And deal with that. And I see. Well, what do you have on your tie there? Is
A dinosaur, a T-Rex.
A T-Rex. Uh-huh.
Now, believe it or not, T-Rex was a vegetarian. If you read Genesis chapter 1, it says all the animals are going to eat plants.
Okay.
Genesis 1:29. God said, "Behold, I've given you every herb and the fruit and the seeds. To you it shall be for meat." Genesis 1:29 and 30 is very clear. Everything before the flood came was vegetarian. After the flood, God said to Noah, Genesis 9, "Now you can eat meat." So that's when it started, and I like meat, okay? But before the flood, they were all vegetarian. T-Rex teeth are found. You know, I've got some replicas of the T-Rex teeth about this long and, you know, this big around, coming down to a point. But when they look at them under the microscope, they find cracks in the enamel that are packed with cellulose. He was a plant eater. There are some animals today with really ferocious-looking teeth that are vegetarians. There's a vegetarian monkey that's got really sharp teeth. Maybe those teeth were for pumpkins or something, you know, tough vegetables. I don't know. There's a deer. You can Google Chinese water deer. It's got tusks like a saber-toothed tiger.
I have seen that.
That's a deer.
Yeah.
Vegetarian.
So now let's talk about this just a little bit. We're going to have to. We're going to have to bring you back on to
sure.
go into the dinosaurs in full on this. But there are a lot of fossils, a lot of digs that have happened in the United States with some rather revealing information.
There was a guy, Anderson, in West Virginia. Well, he was bringing in a lump of coal for his dad when he was 10 years old to put in the furnace, dropped it and broke it, and there was a bell inside, a brass bell inside a lump of coal. Now, the kids are going to be told in school that coal formed 220 million years ago in the Carboniferous era. Complete baloney, complete lie, back to how Satan likes to lie. He's got people today looking at coal and seeing millions and millions of years. We should look at coal and see the judgment of God on the world. That's the forest that Adam and Eve lived in is now turned to coal, and they're burning it to make electricity to run these lights right here. But here's a bell inside a lump of coal. Now, how do you explain that? These are called OOPArt, out-of-place artifacts, O-O-P-A-R-T. OOPArt. You can Google it. There's tons of things been found like that. How do they explain this? They found an iron pot inside a lump of coal. It's now in a creation museum. Break the coal open, there's an iron pot in there. Now, to the Bible-believing Christian, this is no problem. Man was living there before the flood for 1,600 years. Tubal-Cain was an artificer in brass and iron. So they knew how to make iron shortly after Adam and Eve.
Brass, so it's a man-made alloy.
Not a problem. And even iron, you got to mix with some other elements so it's too soft. Mix it with some things to harden it, nickel or stuff like that. Who cares? Well, Tubal-Cain built things out of brass and iron, and here we have a lump of coal with a bell inside, another lump of coal with an iron pot in there. How do you explain it? Well, the Christian has no problem at all. There was a flood that buried the world, and finding human artifacts in coal is unlikely but possible. To the evolutionist, not possible. So they have to look at these things and scratch their head and say, well, how do we hide this from the public?
So, you know, this is really part of our education system where we have been trained to ignore any scientific evidence and any scientific facts that don't fit with our religion.
Correct.
And this...
Every religion probably does that. Here's evidence, goes against your religion. I don't like that, so let's ignore it. And Christians have to be careful. Look at the evidence. I am unaware of any scientific evidence that would contradict the Bible. If you got some, show it to me. I'd like to see it.
You've been doing this for a number of years, too.
Been a Christian 49 years. I've studied it till my brain hurts. And yes, I think the Bible. I remember when I came to the realization, wow, this book is true. And then I thought, oh no, this book is true. Oh no, I better do what it says. I better change my lifestyle to fit what it says. It's convicting when you realize, man, I'm holding God's word.
Now, Kent, you've been on the attack as far as in the school systems, with the education system, the textbook, trying to get this stuff straightened out and exposing the lies that are done in that. You've run into some real opposition out there, out on the West Coast. I understand there's an organization out there that actually has a monument to you out there because of your stand against what they're trying to promulgate.
I could go for 2 days on that topic, but yes, I have been speaking out. I just teach the truth. With the Arkansas House Representatives was going to have a bill. They were going to select textbooks, and they asked me to come speak to the committee that was going to select the textbooks for Arkansas years and years ago. So I went for an hour, and I said, guys, this textbook you're looking at, and I picked that textbook, I copied the pages. I said, this is a lie, this is a lie, it's got 40 lies in the textbooks. I would suggest you either find a new publisher, or tear these pages out, or glue them together, or put a notice in the front cover of the book. Hey kid, the information on page 85 is not correct, okay? Warn the kid, this is a typo, a correction. Mm-hmm. The ACLU lawyer who was there in the meeting got up afterwards and said, what are you going to replace all this stuff with? I said, no, hold it. I didn't mention God, I didn't mention the Bible, didn't mention creation, didn't mention evolution. I just pointed out lies in the textbooks, but that's their evidence for their theory. And she was real worried that if we took out the evidence for evolution, the kids are not going to believe in it. Probably true, and they probably shouldn't. They don't want the lies out of the books because I got a whole 2-hour video just called Lies in the Textbooks. It's part of my seminar.
Okay. We can get into that in your DVD series. Yep. This can be presented. Our kids can learn what the lies are before they open the textbook.
Correct. So you mentioned about the monument to Kent Hovind. I was at the National Center for Science Education, which is actually
science education.
It's
actually very noble.
Complete evolution teaching group. Okay, Jeannie Scott is the president. It's in Berkeley, California. I was speaking at Berkeley University. Nobody would debate me. They asked 146 professors, will you debate Kent Hovind? They all said no. Okay, so I spoke to the students for about an hour and a half. But before that, on the way to the university, we stopped at this National Center for Science Education. And I'm looking around. It's a little room about the size of this room, their building, and they got a bunch of atheist books in there. There's atheist headquarters. Why God doesn't exist. So I'm looking through their literature, and this one guy walked past. He looked at me, and he walked into the office. He turned around, came back, he walked by, looked at me again. About the third time, back and forth, he stopped. He said, "Are you Kent Hovind?" I said, yes, sir. He said, "Oh, no, you're standing in our building." I said, that's because I don't know how to fly. Oh, okay. After I left, they taped a piece of paper on the floor that said, "Kent Hovind stood here," and they would walk by and go like this all the time. Like I'm some kind of curse on me. They go berserk. They are so desperate to not believe in God. A guy like me comes along, a simple high school science teacher that says, hey, the evidence is overwhelming. There's a God, and there was a flood, and you're going to be judged one day, and I'm a threat to them. Just like all the prophets in the Bible were a threat, just by simply pointing out what God said. Half the Bible's written from prison or people who went there because they persecuted, beat up. Yep. Look what happened to Jeremiah. He just simply told the truth.
That's right.
Boy, they hated him for it.
Yeah.
Or Paul stoned him to death. Mm-hmm. So that's been all through history. Look at Jesus. He did nothing wrong. Killed him.
Well, this Dr. Dino, we're going to have you back on because I want to go into your world and for you to present this evidence, because I know that you've got a lot of evidence, a lot of slides, and I understand that you've been collecting some videos as well that's in your series as far as some of these what would we say, extinct species that are still alive, living, and breathing.
Yes, sir.
And so we're going to dig further into this, ladies and gentlemen. This is the opportunity that we want to give you to dig deep into Dr. Kent Hovind's, Dr. Dino, his series on the biblical evidence and the scientific evidence for creation, for the flood, and for why the world is the way it is. And we're going to go into these things so that now in this generation we can begin to reverse that which the Department of Re-Education has started in America. We are not going to allow our children to be brainwashed anymore. We're going to take a stand on these things, and so we're going to be back with Dr. Kent Hovind. But first I would like to pray, and then we will be joining Kent next week on Shabbat Night Live. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Yair Yehovah panav elecha v'chunecha. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua, the Prince of Peace. And so shall the priest of Israel put my name upon the people, and I will bless them. So, as you receive that blessing, that's all you have to do. And I don't speak this blessing under the authority of the Levitical priesthood, the Aaronic priesthood. No, this is a far higher priesthood. It is the priesthood of the Melchizedek, Yeshua, who is the high priest forever, and we are the priests and kings because he has made us righteous. He has made us priests and kings. And you receive that blessing and go in peace because the Heavenly Father hears his name put upon you, and he will bless you in the very things that you need a blessing. I don't need to know what your situation is. He knows what your situation is. But now, may you go in peace, have a good week, and we'll see you back here next week for Shabbat Night Live as we continue with Dr. Dino.